Buenas tardes, soy Paul Quinn, profesor de la Universidad de Alcalá, y esta microtutoría corresponde a la asignatura Cultura Audiovisual y Cine. Hoy vamos a hablar de la profundidad de campo. Pero aunque el espacio encuadrado de la pantalla es de 2 dimensiones, surge la profundidad, tercera dimensión, en virtud de la cercanía y lejanía de los sujetos y objetos. Según su proximidad a la cámara, los sujetos y objetos presentados pueden verse con mayor o menor nitidez. Todo ello se debe a la denominada profundidad de campo, propia del objetivo de la cámara, que consiste en la visión nítida en profundidad. Para entendernos, para un cuadro determinado, la profundidad de campo es el espacio comprendido entre el objetivo más próximo a la cámara, el objetivo, y el objeto más alejado, entre los que la imagen se aprecia con nitidez. Bueno, la profundidad de campo cumple una variedad de funciones. Tiene un valor expresivo, un efecto realista, porque reproduce nuestra visión, nuestra percepción de la realidad. También tiene una dimensión narrativa al organizar la puesta en escena, la ubicación de los personajes en un primer término, un segundo término, tercer término, etc. Como se pueden ver en la famosa escena de Ciudadano Kane. Y luego, pues, a la hora de hablar de la profundidad de campo, es inevitable citar a André Bazin, al gran pope de la nueva ola francesa. En su libro, ¿Qué es el cine? ¿Qué es el cinema? Él distingue entre los directores que creen en la imagen y por tanto en el montaje analítico, troceado, y los que creen en lo que él llama la realidad, los que emplean plano secuencia de larga duración. Bueno, para Bazin, la profundidad de campo no es ninguna moda, sino una, y cito, adquisición capital de la puesta en escena, un progreso dialéctico en la historia del lenguaje cinematográfico. Indagando en los valores y las posibilidades narrativas, dramáticas, incluso psicológicas de la profundidad de campo, afirma lo siguiente: que la profundidad de campo coloca al espectador en una relación con la imagen más próxima de la que tiene con la realidad. Por eso llega a decir que es una modalidad más realista. En segundo lugar, cuando un espectador se enfrenta a una imagen con profundidad de campo, pues se le exige una actitud mucho más activa, una contribución a la película. El montaje analítico, tipo de Eisenstein, y gran parte del cine en general, que trocea la imagen mediante cortes, pues es el director, el que nos guía, el que nos enseña los puntos fuertes de la imagen. Mientras, en un plano de larga duración, con un elemento de profundidad de campo importante, somos nosotros, los espectadores, quienes debemos bucear en las aguas audiovisuales para encontrar los elementos importantes, los elementos claves de la escena o la secuencia. Y por último, André Bazin añade la importancia de la profundidad de campo a la hora de representar el sentido de la ambigüedad de lo real. Dentro de estas consideraciones, Bazin también hace hincapié en la importancia del sonido, que como hemos visto anteriormente, cobra un enorme protagonismo dentro de lo que es el fuera de campo. Y hay un coche fuera de campo. Bueno, a continuación vamos a rescatar un pequeño fragmento de Mark Cousins del capítulo 5 sobre la historia del cine, en el que nos hablará sobre John Ford, Wells, Griffith, Keaton, Bellatar, entre otros artistas, para centrarse en las posibilidades expresivas, dramáticas, narrativas, psicológicas, incluso ideológicas, de lo que denominamos la profundidad de campo.
This scene, Ringo and the girls start a new life together in the mythic, meritocratic West.
Well, kid, I told you not to follow me.
Ford stages the scene in deep space. Stagecoach helped create a new visual fashion for deep space and deep focus in the 1940s. As we've seen in Japan a few years previously, Mitsuguchi was staging things in depth too. But Ford and his cameraman combined deep staging with deep focus. The trend in cinema had been for the flattering effects of long lenses, which create shallow focus, eyes sharp, hair soft, background out of focus. Deep focus uses a wide-angle lens, allowing actors and objects to be really close to the camera and really far away. Both can be seen crisply. And deep focus emphasized the distance between them. It was great at rooms, especially if you kept the camera low, because then you'd see the ceiling, which plunged into the background, making a bold compositional line. Such deep staging and deep focus allowed the audience to choose where to look. As early as 1929, Sergei Eisenstein had suggested it as an alternative to editing. Our eyes do the editing within the frame, jumping around from place to place. Stagecoach's innovations changed film history. One person who saw Stagecoach 30 times in 1940 was this man, Orson Welles, who strode the movie stage, the magician of cinema, who became its colossus.
Your kind indulgence, a miracle of the ancient East.
In this scene from his first film, Citizen Kane, Welles and his cinematographer, Greg Toland, seem to be pushing deep staging as far as it can go. Welles plays a hubristic newspaperman. He's less than a metre from the camera. Everett Sloane is so far away that he's smaller than Wells's nose. Such deep staging forces scale. It's as expressionistic as the shadows of Caligari. More than any other film of the time, Citizen Kane challenged the soft and shallow look of romantic American cinema. But why did it do so? Because of the talent and instincts of the magician who made it. RKO Studio, where Wells made Citizen Kane. He was staging Shakespeare at the age of 4. His mother died when he was 8, and his father when he was 12. He lived in Shanghai, visited the palaces of fated emperors, got to know the story of power, and tramped through its ruins. He should have been the D.W. Griffith of the sound era. In fact, in a career that lasted nearly 50 years, he didn't direct a single foot of film for any of the 4 major Hollywood studios. Norman Lloyd played the poet Cinna in Wells's acclaimed staging of Julius Caesar. The story of the staging was told inaccurately in the recent film Me and Orson Welles.
What is my name? Whither am I going? Where do I dwell?
Enough! This is worse than terrible. Cinna is Shakespeare's indictment of the intelligentsia. He's a lofty, Byronic figure.
You know, I completely disagree.
I never had that kind of argument with Orson. And as I watched that, I was embarrassed because I never would have had that kind of argument with Orson.
But just as an actor like Lloyd revered Wells, so Wells revered his own heroes. Though he learned much from Stagecoach, the great force in his films, their battering ram, comes from theatre and elsewhere. Here he plays Shakespeare's Falstaff, a buffoon shot in deep space. He was interested in Italian Renaissance painting. His attraction to powerful people, kings, tycoons, inventors, is like Shakespeare's. Also like Shakespeare, he looked to the past, to times before democracy and liberalism.
Virtuous man whom I've often noted.
Here it's the world of Henry IV, John Gielgud, dwarfed by a massive empty cathedral.
Have some needful confidence alone.
Citizen Kane thinks of himself as a Medici or Mughal emperor. Kane is full of the lust for power. His world is massive but empty. Maybe the last time he felt anything real was as a boy, playing in the snow on his rosebud sledge in this incredible scene in deep space with tracking camera.
Tell him now.
Yes. I'll sign those papers.
Citizen Kane denounced the grandeur, egomania, and maybe even the cinematic hubris that made Caberia's tracking shots and Intolerance's epic scale. And the General's outlandish production values. Keaton's film was famously expensive. Shakespeare and the Medicis, the Mughals, Ottomans, and Stagecoach were not the only sources of Wells's visual and human ideas. There was the fact of his own body and voice. Both were enormous, mature, unfeasible even. It was like he was painted by Holbein. He could never play a young person, or a teenager, or an ordinary guy, or a 20th century everyman. The space in his films was gigantic because his persona was gigantic. And the sound was gigantic too. Whispers in close-up, echoes from miles back.
49,000 acres of nothing but scenery and statues. I'm lonesome.
Till just yesterday, we've had no less than 50 of your friends at any one time. I think if you look carefully in the West Wing, Susan, you'll find about a dozen vacationers still in residence.
He extended the overlapping dialogue of Howard Hawks' comedies to fill a whole film.
Excuse me, Mr.
Can you
Kane.
prove it isn't?
This just
Mr.
came
Bernstein,
in.
I'd like you to meet Mr. Thatcher.
I'll just borrow How do you do, Mr. Thatcher?
Leland, Mr. Thatcher, my ex-guardian.
From Cuba.
We have no secrets from our readers, Mr. Bernstein. Mr. Thatcher is one of our most devoted readers.
The visual ideas of Toland and Wells about deep focus and deep space excited filmmakers around the world. Look at the depth of this scene in the Maltese Falcon. Humphrey Bogart's thumb, no more than 20 centimeters from the camera, is clearly in focus. Look at this incredible scene in a bar in the best years of our lives. The older man, Frederick March, asks the younger, Dana Andrews, to end his romance with the older man's daughter. Andrews agrees to do so and goes to call her in a phone box. As the phone call's the main drama in this scene, you'd expect director Weiler and DP Greg Toland to set up their camera near the box so that we can see and hear the action. But instead, they put it far away, beside this piano, where a war veteran who's lost his hands is playing. The father's at the piano too, but anxiously looks to the tiny booth in the extreme background. It's as if the crucial action has been sucked away by a black hole. We're forced to imagine the conversation, just as, in real life, we can't always see everything that we want to see. Years later, the Austrian Michael Haneke used deep space to show a woman on a train getting away from harassment. And the Hungarian Béla Tar used deep space to move our eyes from foreground to background and then to foreground again. In each case, the effect was one of tension, as if the world is in a force field in which the people are held. Deep staging in American cinema would become less fashionable again in the 1950s. The new colour widescreen film stocks were just not sensitive enough to suck in all that information at once. So here, in How to Marry a Millionaire, the space is shallow and the actors are displayed across it like a washing line. Very long lenses in the 60s and 70s excited directors about very shallow focus. Here, filmed with a long lens, Anouk Aimée floated in her own visual world like Garbo in the 1920s. And in the 1990s, Michael Mann's film Heat, influenced by pop videos, used the newest types of long lens to create focus so shallow that the lights behind Al Pacino in this shootout become dreamy blobs.